The Vextari had controlled the galaxy for 300 years. Their crystal bodies did not break. Their weapons could destroy entire worlds. They had built cities in the sky and could travel faster than light itself. To them, humans were like insects, small, weak, not important. Zin was a Vextari observer. Her body was made of crystal that shone blue in the darkness. Her mind could process thousands of thoughts at the same time. The council sent her to watch humanity because they wanted to understand what the new species could do. They expected her to write reports about weakness. They expected her to confirm what they already believed, that humans were nothing. Zin arrived at the border station on a morning, when the sun was cold and the ships in the hangar burned with engine fire. She moved through the corridors of the human station and watched the soldiers work. They did not notice her at first. They were busy with repairs and training and the daily work of War. Captain Linda Hayes was the leader of the human forces. She was not tall like some humans Zin had seen. She was strong in the way that stones are strong. Her voice did not shake when she gave orders. Her eyes did not move when danger came close. When Hayes walked into a room, the other soldiers stopped talking and looked at her. This was how humans showed respect to their leaders. Zin requested permission to watch Hayes and her crew. The other Vextari on the station thought this was a waste of time. They told her that human wars were simple. The stronger side won. The weaker side died. There was nothing to learn that they did not already know. But Zin had felt something strange when she watched Hayes command her soldiers. There was something in the way the captain moved. Something in the way she spoke about her crew. It did not fit the reports that the Vextari Council had given her. "I want to observe the rescue mission," Zin said to Captain Hayes. Her voice made sounds like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Hayes turned to look at the Via-Ray, crystal-bodied alien. The captain had seen many strange things in the galaxy, but she had never seen anyone quite like Zin. The Vextari observer was beautiful in a cold way, like looking at a glacier. But her eyes held something that was not beautiful at all. They held the weight of superiority. They held the belief that humans were less than what they were. "You can come," Hayes said, "but you will follow orders. You will not touch anything. You will not give advice unless I ask for it." Zin agreed. The captain did not know it, but Zin was going to discover something that day that would change everything she believed about war. The Kolva's raiders had attacked Station 12 3 days ago. They had taken 15 people. 15 humans who had families. 15 humans who had children waiting at home. The Vextari Council said this was a loss that had to be accepted. They said that rescue missions were too dangerous. They said that sometimes soldiers died, and sometimes civilians died, and there was nothing to do but move forward. But Hayes did not move forward. "We are going to get them back," the captain said in the briefing room. All of our officers were listening. "The Kolvas think we will abandon these people. They think we are like them. They think we value our own safety more than our people. They are wrong." One of the officers, a man named David Pope, asked the question that Zin was thinking. "Captain, the Kolva stronghold is in their territory. We will be outnumbered. We have no guarantee of success." Hayes looked at David Pope. She did not look angry. She looked like someone who understood the cost of what she was asking. "You are right," Hayes said. "We might fail. Some of us might not come back. But I know every person on that station. I know the names of their children. I know what they dreamed of doing before the Kolvas took them. I know them as people, and I will not leave them there to die. Not if there is any chance that I can bring them home." The room was silent. David Pope had a daughter named Sarah. Sarah was 7 years old. She wanted to be a pilot like her father. When David thought about going on this mission, he knew that he might die. He might never teach his daughter to fly. He might never see her grow up and become the pilot she dreamed of being, but he also knew that the people on Station 12 had daughters. They had sons. They had families waiting for them. They were not just names in a report. They were people. "I am in," David Pope said. One by one, the other officers said the same thing. They were all in. They would all follow Captain Hayes into danger. They would all risk their lives for people they did not even know. This was when Zin began to understand that she was wrong about humans. The Vextari measured strength by weapons and technology. They measured power by how much damage they could do. They measured success by how much territory they could control. But humans measured strength by something different. They measured it by whether they would run toward danger to help others. On the night before the mission, Zin watched the soldiers prepare their weapons. She watched them check their suits. She watched them say goodbye to people they loved, using only a few words because they were soldiers and they did not have much time. A young soldier named Michael Grant was a pilot. He was going to fly Captain Hayes into the Colvis stronghold. Michael had a wife and 2 children at home. He held a photograph of them in his hands and looked at their faces for a long time. Then he put the photograph away and picked up his helmet. Michael Grant did not look brave. He looked scared. But he was putting on his helmet anyway. Zin moved close to the captain. "You are certain this will work?" she asked. Hayes shook her head. "No, I am not certain. There is a good chance that some of us will die. But I'm certain that if we do not try, those 15 people will die for sure. So we try." "This is illogical," Zin said. "Maybe," Hayes agreed. "But it is right. And sometimes doing the right thing is more important than doing the logical thing." Zin processed this statement. In the Vextari schools, they learned that logic and right were the same thing. They learned that emotions made you weak. They learned that compassion was a flaw that led to bad decisions. But as she watched, Captain Hayes walked through the hangar and touched the shoulders of her soldiers. As she watched the captain look each soldier in the eye and speak to them by name. As she watched the captain care about the people she was asking to risk their lives, Zin began to wonder if a Vextari council was wrong. The ships launched at dawn. Captain Hayes was not on the flagship. She was in a small fighter with Michael Grant. She was going to lead her people into danger. She was not asking them to do something she would not do herself. The small fleet moved through space toward the Colvis territory. The darkness was everywhere around them. The stars were very far away. The Colvis stronghold was hidden on an asteroid that did not appear on most maps. Zin stood on the bridge of the flagship and watched the scanners. She was about to see what human soldiers could do when they fought for something they believed in. She was about to learn what fear really meant. The journey to the Colvis stronghold took 4 hours. In that time, Zin observed many things that confused her. She watched the soldiers on the flagship move through their routines. They checked weapons. They prepared ammunition. They reviewed maps of the stronghold. But they also did something else that Zin did not understand. They talked to each other. They did not talk about the mission. They did not talk about tactics or weapons. They talked about their lives. They told stories about people they loved. They told jokes that made other soldiers laugh. They shared food from containers that smelled strange, but that seemed to make them happy. A soldier named Patricia Moore sat next to Zin and opened a container of food. Inside was a brown paste that did not look appetizing. Patricia broke pieces of something hard and dipped it into the paste. "Chocolate," Patricia said to Zin. "You want some?" Zin's sensors registered the food as safe, but she did not consume it. She did not understand why humans wanted to eat when they were preparing for battle. "We eat because it helps us not think so much about being scared," Patricia said. She seemed to understand what Zin was thinking without the alien asking. "When you are scared, You need to do something normal, something that feels like life. Eating chocolate is normal for me. It reminds me that I have a home to go back to. This was very strange logic, but Zin filed it away. Humans use small comforts to manage their fear. This was inefficient, but it was also something the Vexthari did not do. As the fleet moved deeper into Kolva's space, the danger became real. The scanners began picking up energy signatures. The Kolvas had sensors too. They knew the human ships were coming. Captain Hayes appeared on the communication screen from her fighter. Her face was calm, but Zin could see the tension in her jaw. The captain's heart rate was elevated. Her body was ready for combat. All units, yellow alert, Hayes ordered. Weapons armed but not active. We maintain formation. No one fires unless they fire first. Understood? The fleet acknowledged. Zin could feel the change in the atmosphere. Fear moved through the ship like cold water. But the soldiers did not panic. They moved to their positions. They checked their weapons one more time. They did what they had been trained to do. The asteroid where the Kolvas kept their stronghold appeared on the scanners as a bleak shape in the darkness. It was not round like most asteroids. It had sharp edges and deep cracks where the Kolvas had dug into the rock to build their fortress. Zin's sensors detected weapons platforms on the surface. She detected energy shields. She detected hundreds of Kolva's warriors waiting inside. The human fleet was outgunned. The Kolvas had more weapons. They had better defenses. They had the advantage of position and preparation. They are waiting for us, Zin said. I know, Captain Hayes replied over the communication. That is why we are going to do something they do not expect. The captain's fighter accelerated. Michael Grant pushed the engines to maximum power. The small ship cut through space like an arrow fired from a bow. The rest of the fleet followed, but Hayes was always in front. The captain was not staying in a safe location. She was leading her soldiers into danger. The Kolva stronghold activated its weapons. Beams of energy cut through space. They were blue and white and carried enough power to burn through metal and destroy ships. The human fleet twisted and turned to avoid the fire. Ships moved in patterns that seemed almost like dancing. Michael Grant flew with a skill that was hard to believe. He flew the fighter like it was part of his own body. First shield platform down. Lieutenant Victoria Stone reported from the weapons station of Hayes' fighter. Her voice was steady, even as explosions lit up the darkness around them. The human ships pressed forward. They did not retreat. They did not slow down. They moved through the fire like soldiers who had accepted that some of them would die and were willing to pay that price. One of the human ships, a support vessel commanded by Captain Robert Evans, took a direct hit. The ship's shields flared and collapsed. Another hit struck the hull, and the ship began to lose power. The crew scrambled to maintain control, but the damage was catastrophic. The Henderson is going down, Patricia Moore reported, her voice catching with emotion. Those were her friends on that ship. Those were people she knew. All units focus on getting them out, Hayes ordered. Rescue protocols now. 2 smaller ships broke from formation and moved toward the damaged vessel. They maneuvered alongside the Henderson and opened their bay doors. Crew members from the doomed ship began jumping across the gap. The Henderson's captain, Robert Evans, was the last one out. He looked back at his ship one more time, then jumped. He landed in the rescue ship, and the bay doors closed just as another explosion ripped through the Henderson. The ship died in fire and light. 12 crew members were saved. 12 people who would see their families again. The Vexthari would have left the Henderson behind. The Vexthari would have continued the mission and accepted the loss. But the humans stuck to save people, even though it put them in greater danger. Zin's crystal structure vibrated with something she did not have a name for. The stronghold was getting closer. The weapons fire was getting heavier. The human fleet was taking damage. One ship had a hull breach that was being sealed with emergency protocols. Another ship lost its navigation system and had to be guided by other vessels, but they kept moving forward. "Why do you not turn back?" Zin asked Captain Hayes. "Because there are 15 people down there who are counting on us," Hayes said. "Because some things matter more than safety. Because if we turn back, we become the kind of people who abandon others." The fighter carrying Hayes and Michael Grant dove toward the asteroid's surface. The Stronghold's weapons tried to track them, but the ship was too fast. It was too small. Michael Grant flew through passages that seemed too narrow for the ship to fit through. He flew through storms of laser fire. He flew like he was not flying a machine, but like the machine was an extension of his own will. Then they were inside the Stronghold, inside the dark tunnels of the Colvis Fortress. Inside where the raiders kept their prisoners. Inside where danger was at its maximum, the rest of the human fleet provided cover from outside, keeping the Colvis defenders focused on them instead of on the rescue team. On the surface of the asteroid, in the corridors of the Stronghold, Captain Hayes and her team moved toward the detention block. They did not know if the prisoners were still alive. They did not know if they were in time. They only knew that they had to try. Zin watched the signals on the scanners. She watched the captain move through the Stronghold, like someone who had always known where to go. She watched the rescue team work with precision and speed. She watched humans risk everything for people they had never met. And for the first time in her crystal existence, Zin understood that the Vex theory measurement of strength was incomplete. Strength was not just about weapons. Strength was about will. Strength was about refusing to abandon people, even when logic said you should. The detention block was ahead. The prisoners were there. The rescue was about to happen, but the Colvis were not going to make it easy. The detention block was located deep inside the asteroid. The walls were made of metal that had been scarred by impacts and weapons fire. The air inside smelled bad. It smelled like sweat and fear and suffering. The Colvis did not care about comfort for prisoners. They cared about control. Captain Hayes and her team, led by Sergeant Henry Cooper, moved through the corridors with weapons ready. They did not run. They did not panic. They moved like people who had trained for this moment 1,000 times. The first door was locked. The Colvis had sealed it electronically. Ensign Daniel Foster, the tech specialist, moved to the lock and began working. His hands moved fast. Lines of code appeared on his portable screen. The lock was complex, but Foster was better. In 30 seconds, the door opened. Inside the detention block, the prisoners lay on the ground. Some were injured. Some were in bad condition. But they were alive. All 15 of them were still alive. The youngest prisoner was a girl named Emma. She was only 5 years old. Her mother had been teaching her to paint when the Colvis took them. Emma had been dreaming about colors and art. Then everything turned dark. Sergeant Henry Cooper moved to the prisoners and began the evacuation. He was a big man with a hard face, but his hands were gentle when he helped the injured prisoners to their feet. He did not waste time talking. He worked with efficiency, but Emma would not move. The little girl was terrified. She had been in the Stronghold for 3 days. She had heard the sounds of the Colvis. She had felt the vibrations of weapons fire. She did not understand what was happening. She did not understand that the humans had come to save her. She only understood that more humans had come. And humans meant danger. Emma curled into a ball on the ground and refused to move. Henry Cooper could have forced her. He could have picked her up and carried her. He could have prioritized speed over comfort. This was what the Colvis would have done. This was what most soldiers would have done. But Henry Cooper knelt down next to the small girl. "Hey," he said in a voice that was soft and not threatening. "My name is Henry. What is your name?" Emma did not answer. "I know you were scared," Henry said. "That is okay to be scared. I am scared too, but I need your help right now. I need you to come with me so we can get somewhere safe." "Can you help me?" Emma looked at the sergeant's face. He did not look angry. He did not look mean. He looked like someone she could trust. "I want my mommy," Emma said. "I know," Henry said. "We are going to find your mommy. But first, you need to come with me. Can you do that?" Emma nodded slowly. Henry Cooper picked her up gently and put her on his shoulders. The little girl held onto his neck, and her fear became something smaller. It was still there, but it was not overwhelming anymore. The evacuation began in earnest. The rescue team moved the prisoners through the corridors. Some prisoners could walk on their own. Some needed help. The team worked with precision, supporting the injured, keeping the line moving. But the Kolvas were not passive. Alarms began to sound throughout the stronghold. The Kolvas warriors knew that their prisoners were being taken. They organized a response. Footsteps echoed through the tunnels. Energy weapons charged in the distance. Captain Hayes was waiting at the intersection before the detention block. She had positioned herself as a barrier between the rescue team and the approaching warriors. "Pick up the pace," Hayes commanded. "Hostile forces inbound. All units, move to extraction point. We are leaving in 6 minutes." The rescue team accelerated. They moved faster through the tunnels, but the corridors were narrow. The line was stretched out, and the Kolvas were getting closer. The first warrior appeared around the corner. It was massive, 7 feet tall, with skin like armor and eyes that held no compassion. The Kolvas warrior fired its weapon. Captain Hayes returned fire without hesitation. The beam from her weapon struck the warrior in the chest, and the raider fell. But more warriors were coming. The captain fell back step by step, moving with the rescue team, firing at every warrior that appeared. Her weapon made sharp sounds that echoed off the metal walls. The extraction point was still 3 minutes away. One of the rescue team members, Officer Marcus White, was hit by a blast. The energy weapon struck him in the shoulder, and he fell to the ground. The burn was severe. He could not continue walking on his own. Ensign Daniel Foster, the tech specialist, ran back and grabbed Marcus White. He put the wounded officer's arm around his shoulders and continued moving. Daniel Foster was small and not as strong as the others, but he did not hesitate. He lifted Marcus White and carried him forward. Henry Cooper, still carrying Emma on his shoulders, looked back at the danger. He was torn. He wanted to help. He wanted to fight. But Emma was holding onto his neck, and the little girl needed him. He kept moving forward. The corridors became narrower. The Kolvas realized their prisoners were escaping, and they initiated emergency protocols. The stronghold began to shake. Deep explosions rumbled through the walls. The Kolvas were destroying sections of their own fortress to try to trap the rescue team inside. "Keep moving," Hayes shouted. "Do not stop for anything." But the path ahead was blocked. A section of the corridor had collapsed, sending debris into the passage. The rescue team could not go forward. They could not go back. They were trapped. "Alternative route," Foster said, "is breathing hard from carrying Marcus White. There is a ventilation shaft 12 meters to the left." Ensign Foster had studied the stronghold's internal structure. He had memorized the blueprints. He knew there was another way out. The team moved to the ventilation shaft. It was small. It was not designed for humans to travel through easily. But it was the only way out, thought Captain Hayes. Provided cover fire while the prisoners and the wounded were helped into the shaft. Daniel Foster went first with Marcus White, then the prisoners, then the other team members. Emma was the last to enter the shaft. Henry Cooper lifted her toward the opening, and she grabbed the edges and crawled inside. "Go," Hayes commanded to the young soldier. "I am right behind you." But the corridor was collapsing. The Colvas had destroyed the main support structure. The ceiling was coming down. Henry Cooper looked at the captain. He wanted to argue. He wanted to stay and help. But he could hear the fear in Emma's voice from inside the ventilation shaft. He could feel the responsibility of the life he was carrying. He climbed into the shaft. Captain Hayes fired one more time at the approaching warriors, then turned and ran toward the ventilation shaft as the ceiling collapsed behind her. She dove into the opening just as metal and rock crashed down into the corridor where she had been standing seconds before. The ventilation shaft was hot and dark. It was difficult to move through. The prisoners were scared. The wounded were in pain. But they were moving. They were getting closer to freedom. Behind them, the sound of pursuit echoed through the alternative passages. The Colvas were not giving up. They were trying to cut off the escape route, but the human team was moving faster. The extraction point was ahead. The fighter ships were waiting. The rescue team and the prisoners emerged from the fortress into the open bay where the ships were positioned. Henry Cooper emerged first, still carrying Emma. The little girl was crying, but she was safe. The first ship was opening its bay doors. The prisoners began to load inside. The rescue team helped them aboard. The Colvas warriors were getting closer. The gunfire was getting heavier. "All personnel board now," Hayes commanded. "We are leaving." The rescue team moved into the ships. The bay doors began to close. The Colvas warriors were 50 meters away, then 30 meters, then 20. One of the warriors fired a weapon that struck the closing bay door. The metal sparked and twisted, but the door finished closing. The ships launched with engines, screaming against the gravity of the asteroid. They shot upward toward the waiting fleet. Behind them, the fortress continued to collapse. The Colvas were left with nothing but dust and anger. The extraction point was supposed to be safe. The human fleet was positioned to provide cover. The Colvas stronghold was being left behind. The rescue team had succeeded in getting the prisoners out of the fortress, but success was not the same as safe. The ships carrying the rescue team and the prisoners launched toward the fleet. Behind them, the asteroid fortress was collapsing. The internal explosions continued. Massive pieces of rock broke away from the asteroid and fell into space. The destruction was total and final. But the Colvas were not finished fighting. Defense platforms that had been dormant activated on other parts of the asteroid. They had been hidden in locations that the human reconnaissance had missed. The platforms came online with a scream of energy, and they began firing at the escaping ships. One of the transport ships, carrying 8 of the prisoners, took a direct hit on its starboard side. The shields flared and failed. The next hit struck the hull, and the ship began to lose atmospheric pressure. Alarms screamed inside the vessel. The pilot, a woman named Angela Torres, made calculations in her mind. The damage was catastrophic. The ship could not make it back to the fleet, but she could not stop moving forward either. All passengers to the rear section, Angela commanded over the communication system. "We are going to attempt an emergency docking with the rescue frigate." "Hold on." The ship limped forward, trailing fire and pressure. The frigate adjusted its course to meet the damaged transport. The pilots worked together through the communication channel, coordinating the approach like a dance that had to be performed perfectly. In the medical area, one of the prisoners, a man named Robert Yang, was injured severely. He had been struck during the fortress collapse when a piece of metal caught his leg. He was bleeding. He was in pain, but he refused to let the rescue team carry him. He said he could walk. This was a lie. Robert Yang could barely stand, but he knew that time was short. He knew that the ship might not make it. He did not want to slow down the evacuation. Sergeant Henry Cooper was not going to accept this lie. "Stop moving," Henry said, and his voice was the voice of a command. Robert Yang tried to continue forward, but Henry Cooper grabbed him and picked him up. The sergeant was strong enough to carry the injured prisoner even while moving through the corridors of a dying ship. "Put me down," Robert Yang said. "You cannot carry me and move fast enough." "I will move as fast as I need to," Henry Cooper replied. No one gets left behind. The frigate was close now. The docking clamps extended. The transport ship, burning and damaged, aligned with the docking port. The connection was rough and violent, but it held. The passengers and crew began evacuating from the transport ship to the frigate. Robert Yang was the last to go. Henry Cooper carried him through the passage that connected the two ships. Behind them, the transport vessel's damage was getting worse. They reached the frigate, and the docking collar sealed behind them just as the transport ship's life support completely failed. The vessel was dead now, empty, a grave in space, but everyone aboard had escaped. The frigate turned toward the fleet, but it was slower than the other ships. It was damaged. It was going to be the last to reach safety, and the Colvas were not finished. 3 Colvas patrol ships detached from the asteroid and moved to intercept the fleeing human vessels. They were smaller than the human warships, but they were fast. They were maneuverable. They were hunting. Captain Hayes was in her fighter, still providing support for the evacuation. She saw the Colvas patrol ships accelerating toward the slower vessels. "All units, defensive positions," Hayes commanded. "Protect the transports. No Colvas get past us." The human fleet turned to engage the patrol ships. Weapons fire lit up the space around the asteroid. The darkness was broken by the colors of energy beams and the fire of explosions. One of the patrol ships targeted the frigate, carrying Henry Cooper and Robert Yang and the prisoners. The Colvas had decided to destroy as many prisoners as possible, even if they could not prevent the escape. They wanted vengeance. The frigate captain, Commander Patrick Sullivan, maneuvered to avoid the fire. The ship twisted and turned, but the frigate was not designed for combat. It was designed for transport. Its weapons were defensive only. "We cannot hold formation much longer," Commander Sullivan reported to Captain Hayes. "The Colvas ship is pursuing. Damage report incoming." The frigate was taking hits. Its shields were failing. Its engines were running hot from the acceleration. Henry Cooper was on the bridge when the report came in. He was still carrying Robert Yang. The injured prisoner had not said anything for several minutes. He was losing consciousness from blood loss. Henry Cooper needed a plan. He needed a way to keep this ship alive. He moved to the weapons console. He was a soldier, not a weapons officer, but he understood the basics of how human guns worked. "Let me target the pursuit ship," Henry said to Commander Sullivan. The commander looked at the sergeant. "That is a Colvas patrol ship. Our weapons will not do significant damage." "Maybe not," Henry said, "but I can make them think twice before continuing to chase us." Henry Cooper fired the defensive weapons. The beams were not powerful enough to destroy the Colvas ship, but they were accurate. They struck the patrol vessel's shields and caused them to flare. They damaged the ship's forward sensors. The Colvas captain decided that the pursuit was costing them too much. The patrol ship broke off the chase and turned to engage one of the human warships instead. The frigate was free to continue toward the fleet. Behind all of the human ships, Captain Hayes and her fighter were the rear guard. She was the last line of defense. She was protecting all of the people who were trying to escape. A Colvas patrol ship came straight at her fighter. Ensign Michael Grant, at the controls of the fighter, twisted the ship hard to the right. Energy fire streaked past them so close that they could see the heat of it through the canopy. Grant twisted left, twisted right, flew upside down through the chaos. Captain Hayes tracked the Colvas ship and fired. Her first shot struck the patrol vessel's engine section. The ship began to lose power. "One more," Hayes said. Michael Grant positioned the fighter for another pass. Hayes fired again. The Culver ship exploded in fire and light. The last patrol ship was now engaged with the rest of the human fleet. It could not win. It had already lost half of its weapons systems to human gunfire. The Culver's pilot tried to break away, but the human ships blocked the route. The Culver's pilot had to make a choice: fight and die, or run and accept defeat. The Culver's pilot chose to run. The patrol ship accelerated away from the battlefield, leaving the asteroid fortress and the human fleet behind. It was the last threat. The human ships, damaged and wounded but still flying, formed up into a defensive formation. The fleet was back together. All of the prisoners were safe. All of the rescue team was safe. Captain Hayes brought her fighter back to the flagship. Michael Grant guided the ship into the hangar. The engines shut down. The pilot and the captain climbed out of the cockpit slowly, both of them exhausted. On the bridge of the flagship, Zinn watched the scanners clear. No more hostile contacts. No more threats. The mission was complete, but Zinn's sensors were confused. Zinn's mind was processing something that did not fit into the Vexthari understanding of war. The humans had succeeded, not because they were stronger, not because they had better weapons, not because they had the advantage in numbers or position. They had succeeded because they refused to leave people behind. They had succeeded because they cared about the prisoners more than they cared about their own safety. Zinn realized that she had been wrong about fear. Fear was not a weakness. Fear was what kept you connected to what mattered. Fear was what made you strong enough to do dangerous things for people you loved. The humans understood this. The Vexthari did not. The medical bays of the flagship were overcrowded with wounded and injured. The 15 rescued prisoners needed medical care. The crew members who had been hurt during the mission needed treatment. The doctors and nurses moved quickly, prioritizing the most serious cases. Robert Yang was the most critical. The metal that had struck his leg during the fortress collapse had caused significant blood loss. He was unconscious. His body was fighting to survive. The human doctors worked on him with precision and speed, repairing the damage, replacing lost blood, saving his life. His family was waiting in the corridor outside the medical bay. His wife, Margaret Yang, stood with their 2 teenage children. They had no information. They did not know if Robert would live or die. They only knew that he was alive for now, and they held on to that like a life raft in a storm. Captain Linda Hayes walked into the corridor and moved toward Margaret Yang. The captain had just finished her report. She had documented everything that happened during the mission. She had recorded the success and the cost. Margaret saw the captain coming and stood up. She was afraid. She thought that the captain had come to tell her that her husband was dead. "He's going to live," Hayes said immediately. "The doctors are certain. He's going to recover." Margaret Yang made a sound that was between a laugh and a cry. She put her hands over her face, and her body shook with relief. Her children moved close to her and held her. "Thank you," Margaret said. "Thank you for bringing him back. Thank you for not leaving him." Captain Hayes placed her hand on Margaret's shoulder. She did not know what to say. She had only done what seemed right. She had only refused to abandon someone who needed help. Across the medical bay, Emma was lying in a recovery pod. The little girl had not been injured physically, but her mind had been traumatized. She had seen things that no child should see. She had experienced fear that no child should experience, but she was alive. Sergeant Henry Cooper sat next to Emma's recovery pod. He had not left since they brought her aboard. He had other duties. Other soldiers needed his attention, but he stayed anyway. When Emma woke up, she opened her eyes and saw the sergeant sitting there. "Hello," Henry said, his voice gentle. "Welcome back. You are safe now." Emma looked at the big soldier with the hard face, and something in his eyes made her believe that what he said was true. She was safe. The danger was over. She could sleep again without fear. Ensign Michael Grant, the fighter pilot, was in the hangar inspecting his ship. The fighter had taken damage during the mission. The hull had been scored by energy fire. The canopy had a small crack in it. The engines needed maintenance, but the ship had brought Captain Hayes and her team back alive. A technician named Robert Lucas was helping with the inspection. Robert had been assigned to the station only 3 months ago. He was young and wanted to prove himself. "You saved a lot of people today," Robert said to Michael Grant. Michael did not say anything at first. He looked at the damage to his ship and thought about how close they had come to failure. He thought about the transport ship that had been destroyed. He thought about how many ways the mission could have gone wrong. "We all saved them," Michael finally said. "You were not there, but you maintained this ship. You made sure that the systems were working correctly. That is why I could fly it the way I needed to. That is why it brought us home." This was how humans worked. They understood that success required everyone. The pilot needed the technician. The technician needed the command officers who made the decisions. The command officers needed the soldiers who carried out the orders. Everyone mattered. Everyone was important. The Vexthari Council demanded a report from Zin. They wanted to know about the human military operation. They wanted her analysis and her recommendations. Zin prepared her report carefully. She included all of the relevant data. She included the tactical decisions. She included the outcomes of the mission. And then she included her personal assessment. "The human species possesses qualities that the Vexthari have not valued in our own military doctrine," Zin wrote. "Humans measure strength not only by firepower or technological advancement. They measure strength by their willingness to risk their lives for people they care about. They measure strength by their refusal to abandon those who are vulnerable. They measure strength by their compassion." The council responded with confusion and criticism. They said that compassion was a weakness. They said that humans were primitive and illogical. They said that Zin had been contaminated by exposure to human culture and could no longer be trusted to make objective observations. Zin accepted their judgment. She knew that they would not change their minds, but she also knew that she had seen the truth. She had watched humans do something that the Vexthari considered impossible. She had watched them succeed through will and determination and care for other people. On the night after the mission, Zin asked for permission to speak with Captain Hayes. The request was granted. Zin found the captain in her quarters, looking at a photograph. The photograph showed a human child, a girl, standing in sunlight. The girl was smiling. "That is my daughter," Hayes said before Zin could ask. "Her name is Catherine. She's 8 years old. While I was on the mission, I was thinking about her. I was thinking about whether I would come home to see her grow up. But you continued anyway," Zin said. "I did," Hayes confirmed. "Because Emma needed someone to save her. Because Robert Yang's family needed him to come home. Because some things matter more than safety." Zin processed this statement. In the Vexthari way of thinking, the captain should have refused the mission to protect her own family. Family was the most important thing in most cultures. Duty to family came before duty to strangers, but humans were different. They understood that family was important, but they also understood that other people's families mattered too. They were willing to risk their own loved ones to save strangers' loved ones. "I have learned something from you," Zin said. Captain Hayes looked up at the alien observer. "What is that?" "I have learned that fear is not a weakness," Zin said. "Fear is the sign that something matters to you. Fear is what makes you human." Hayes smiled. "We are not so different, Zin. You have taught me something too." The Vexthari are not the enemies I thought you were. You are just different. And maybe, eventually, you will understand what we understand." Zin returned to her duties as observer. She continued to document human military operations. But her perspective had changed. She no longer looked for weakness in humans. She looked for the strength that came from caring about other people. The Vexthari Council never accepted her conclusions. They continued to believe in the superiority of crystal structure and ancient technology. But Zin knew the truth. She had tasted fear in the darkness of the Kolva's fortress. She had watched humans run toward danger instead of away from it. She had learned what real strength meant. Weeks passed, and the rescue mission became known throughout the fleet and then throughout the galaxy. The humans told the story of how they refused to abandon 15 prisoners. The Kolvas learned that humans would come after captured people no matter the cost. Other species began to understand that humans fought differently than they expected. Emma returned to her home. She had nightmares for a while, but Henry Cooper wrote her letters. He sent her drawings that she could color. He sent her messages telling her that she was brave, that she was safe, that the galaxy was not all darkness. Robert Yang recovered from his injuries. He spent time with his family. He told them the story of the sergeant who had carried him through the dying ship and refused to leave him behind. Captain Hayes continued to lead her fleet. She continued to protect the innocent. She continued to teach her soldiers that people mattered more than safety, that compassion was a strength, and that there was honor in refusing to abandon those who needed help. And Zin continued to observe, to learn, and to understand that the Vexthari had been wrong about a lot of things. The humans had shown her that fear was the opposite of weakness. Fear was the beginning of courage.